Red, Taylor's version, is finally out, and after listening to it in full, both re-recorded favorites and the vault tracks, I wanted to make a video like I did for Reputation about, well, the Red era. I want to walk through the history of the era, the vault tracks themselves, and what they hint about how this era was formed. I also want to explain why I think this record, while no longer objectively her best record to date, is still the most Taylor Swift album ever, if that makes any sense. I have timestamps for every section, but for now, I'm going to talk about the history. Let us go back in time to 2011. Taylor Swift is fresh off Speak Now, an album she wrote entirely by herself to flex her songwriting abilities. The album even won Best Country Song and Solo Performance for Mean. At this point in her career, 3 country albums in, she feels the need to experiment, to escape the comfort zone that she's built for herself in the country space. The very first track for this record that would eventually become Red was feature fan favorite All Too Well, written after a breakup with Jake Gyllenhaal in late 2010. Nathan Chapman, her main producer at the time, would work with her through the title track Red, which caught the eye of Scott Borchetta. I think we all know Scott Borchetta, Big Machine Records CEO, and then one of Taylor's biggest allies, and now the reason why we even have these re-recordings in the first place. Borchetta actually wanted Taylor to attempt to make a pop song out of the track. Swift and Chapman experimented with the track, eventually landing on the final version, but Taylor, eager to hone her craft, tasked Borchetta with introducing her to pop mastermind Max Martin. Martin and Shellback, who'd become staple Swift collaborators in her later works, eventually created I Knew You Were Trouble, 22, and We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, 3 of the 7 singles released for the era. Other producers would include Jeff Basker, Butch Walker, Dan Wilson, and Dan Huff, to name a few. With the record fully assembled, the marketing has to be talked about here. It was one crazy era that started with a web chat and the release of We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, her first proper pop single, which became her first #1 hit after coming close so many times. I just remember being so hyped because Taylor did this countdown to Red thing where she dropped 4 tracks before the album would drop in October. Each of them, Begin Again, Red, I Knew You Were Trouble, and State of Grace charted in the top 20. That's how hyped everyone was. 3 of them ended up being singles at some point. Fans were just so hyped. She had Papa John's boxes, Ked shoes, and a new look that was just peak millennial chic. You had to be there. The album itself would drop on October 22, 2012 and sell 1.2 million records in its first week, the second of 4 consecutive million debuts. Speak Now started the streak and Reputation was the last. While the album was extremely successful, it did not come without backlash. For one, I remember the media had been scrutinizing her romantic life to pieces, while simultaneously the country community, upon seeing her success in the pop space, started to question if she was really a country artist, both of which were extremely unfair situations to be in. Additionally, upon its release, people did not revere this record as high as we do now. There were reservations about the lack of cohesiveness. People really did not like the track listing. There was contradictory messaging, according to some people. It's so funny that people in 2012 did not get Red as it came out. It's only been recently that people have been considering Red the best album that she's had, embracing it for its bravery and lyricism, Taylor's fearless exploration of genres, and paving the way for her later works. Rolling Stone even ranks it as the 99th best album of all time, as they should. The tour was a smashing success. Its singles all charted relatively high. It seemed like a favorite for that fateful Grammy night in 2014. It ended up being snubbed across the board, which would encourage Taylor to truly commit to being a pop artist for her most successful era to date. 1989. In hindsight, I chalk the losses to the album being way too eclectic for the Academy's taste at the time, and the country voters who were super confused by the pop elements of the record. It was truly ahead of its time, and it honestly should have won. Years later, we're being treated to a re-recording with deleted vault tracks by Taylor herself in her ongoing bid to own her masters after Scott Borchetta had sold them off to malevolent forces, if we're going to be honest. This re-recording is stunning. All the tracks feel so revitalized with better voicing and stronger instrumentals. I actually like what they did with Girl at Home, which was underbaked on the original. I feel like the more subtle tracks on the record, like Treacherous, actually feel more full than they did in the past. I did actually make a video about how I feel about the new vocal takes, but this re-recording, she really channeled those old feelings in a way that I just did not hear on the Fearless re-recording. No shade. And that just about wraps up the history portion of this video. Now it's time to talk about the vault tracks and how they kind of hint at behind the scenes confusion on my end. Upon hearing these vault tracks, I realized how far Taylor had really explored her range as an artist to develop this album. It made me realize that the track listing that we got, for the most part, actually was the best we could have gotten at the time. But I'm so glad to hear all of these tracks. Better Man absolutely deserved its Grammy, but it also deserved to be on the standard. It is a strong piece of songwriting, it thematically fits the record, Taylor's vocal performance here is just above and beyond. It has been too long, we deserve this recording. Nothing New with Phoebe Bridgers feels like an epilogue to 22. It's about the roughness of realization and growing up and the emptiness of the morning after a wild night. It also breaks the curse of Taylor having all of her female collaborators not have their own verses. Phoebe holds her own with Taylor on this track. Their voices match so well in a way that I never really anticipated. The lyrics just feel so lived in. I see why it was cut. It is such a downer, but it's so distinctive in sound and it's a highlight. Babe is such an underrated cut that she gave away to Sugarland. I get why it was cut as it overlaps some lyrical ground that she touched on better on the standard, but it is such an earworm. Some of her best melody work to date. Fight me. The new intro kind of took me out a little bit, but it does add some extra life, as do the vocals at the end. The horns make it really feel like a writing collab with Train's Pat Monahan, which it is, surprisingly enough. Message in a Bottle is just so weird, okay? It is the poppiest thing that I've heard Taylor do. If you ever wondered what Taylor would have sounded like as a 2010-2011 pop diva, this one is for you. It is so bubbly and cute, almost like a prototype for 1989 in some ways. You can tell that Swift, Martin, and Shellback were trying to figure out how to do pop in a Taylor way here. It reminds me of Carly Rae Jepsen's Kiss in some ways, but I absolutely love this track. It is a highlight. I get why it was cut. I'm just so glad we got to hear it. It's just so sweet. I love it. I Bet You Think About Me with Chris Stapleton. This one's really melodically fun and it reminds me of Piano Man by Billy Joel somehow. It sounds like a song that you would play in a really cute scene between a couple in a movie. The lyrics really feel like old school Taylor. It's a very fun storytelling experience, almost like a predecessor to the Folklore Evermore Not Writing About Myself Taylor. Like most of these cuts, I actually do get why they weren't put on. This one just does not sonically or thematically fit Red as a record. Forever Winter is a beautiful track vocally, instrumentally, and lyrically. I feel like this is a prequel to Tolerate It in some ways, the couple in that song before that song even happened, before the breakdown. It is so earnest and on the nose. It's almost as if Grenade by Bruno Mars had been written without all of the cliches. Thematically, it really doesn't hold up to the standard track listing story, but again, I'm thoroughly impressed by the ground Taylor covered while making this album. Run with Ed Sheeran. Now this track would have been an amazing addition on Multiply, Ed Sheeran's record from 2014. Sonically, it actually does sound like it'd fit Red, but thematically, this is another imaginative exercise. Everything Has Changed is a classic, but it's fun to imagine the alternate world where we got Run instead of that one. It's arguably more romantic than Everything Has Changed, but less grounded in a way that Red as an album needed to be to work. The Very First Night is such a happy country pop bop. Tonally, it really does sound like a Speak Now track. It's so sweet and saccharine. If I had to put this on the standard, I'd actually replace Stay 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 with this track. RIP to all you Stay 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 loyalists. I love that track too, but this one is just so cheesy in a way that fits the Red theme a little bit more, at least for me. This track makes me feel like I'm flying, and I love that cheesy feeling. I wish we had it in 2012, though Starlight sort of covers what the song was trying to get at, so I get why it was axed. And finally, the 10-minute version of All Too Well. I cannot put words into how this track really did actually live up to the hype, which for me, I actually was afraid. I was afraid that this wasn't going to live up. It is encompassing, it is too much information, it is engrossing, it is wistful, it is angry, it is so honest, and it feels like one last truth bomb to air out all those feelings that she buried down like 10 years ago. You kept me like a secret, but I kept you like an oath. It just hit so hard for me, like war flashbacks to dating someone closeted for me personally, like honestly, war flashbacks. The new lines in those bridges, I bawled my eyes out when she dropped that it was supposed to be fun turning 21 line. Okay, that line killed me. She read Jake Gyllenhaal for Filth here. If you have ever cried to this song about anybody, this version is going to wreck you one last time before healing your heart in 10 minutes. Overall, these vault tracks as standalone work are stellar. I cannot imagine most of these being released in 2012, but in 2021, I'm so happy that we finally have them, that we finally get to see the labor that Taylor did to render Red as well as we got it in 2012. Before I go, I do want to talk about how this is the most quintessential Taylor Swift record to date. I love Reputation and Folklore and Evermore, all albums that I actually argue do certain aspects of this album better, whether it be the songwriting or the pop portions itself, but Red paved the way. This album is so important. It really paved the path for these records that we love so much. As a transitional record, we get a refined taste of her country songwriting sensibilities, but also a taste of how she would do in rock, pop, dubstep, you name it. It's nearly all here on this record. I feel in some ways that this album was a demo for who Taylor could evolve to become. State of Grace, the opener, and one of my favorite tracks along with Holy Ground especially underscore an unexplored rock side of her. It's a side of her that I really hope that she explores on her next new album. The Lucky One prophetically tells the stories of her late 20s, if you really think about it. Treacherous, a deep cut, carries hints of her indie folk sensibilities. Everything Has Changed solidified her friendship with fellow songwriting wunderkind Ed Sheeran, while Begin Again, I Almost Do, and All Too Well cement her place as a country icon. We know the legacies of her pop-sounding tracks as well. Heck, even Better Man, an outtake on here, which should have been a main track, won a Grammy. Just to remind you guys, just proving that this whole era was a gold mine. It was a golden age of something good and right and real. If only all of us had the hindsight to realize it as it was happening. The legacy of Red is just such a powerful one. You know, if you really think about it, I do think that of all her records, this one will probably be the one that is remembered. In my hearts of hearts, I can admit that this is probably her best record. But will it be her best record at the end of her career? I don't think so. I don't think so, guys. She has it in her to make one last amazing record, and we're gonna get it years down the line, and I'm so excited to see that record, to hear that record one day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into my video. I'm so grateful for all my viewers, new people, old people. Like, subscribe, comment your favorite track from Red, fight me in the comments about what your favorite track was. Thank you to my members, and I will see you next video. I'm just trying to have this video end at 1313. How funny would it be if I ended it at 1313? That'd be like an Easter egg, am I right, guys? 1313, come on, let's hit it. Oh, I got it.